Access granted.
Sup y'all! In today's video I'd like to talk to you about the test levels pyramid. I don't know what the fuck have I just shown, looks like a fucking pyramid to me. Product requirements, and maybe somehow tie it all with ChatGPT, with some practical examples of course. So let's start with testing layers pyramid. Various sources define different amount of such layers. Some give 4, some give 5, but I'd rather stop at 3 main layers, which you will 100% encounter throughout your IT journey. UI, API, and DB. Yes, it is that plain simple. And let's report a couple of defects, shall we?
Okay, so let's try and purchase the gaming chair on one of our top marketplaces in Ukraine, which is called like this. I guess it's pronounced the Rosetka, which means the socket in English. And I will try to catch a bug and report it, of course. We go to our order. As you can see, my cell phone is already provided here. So I've selected the I am a new buyer option and I've got my cell phone provided. So when I click I confirm the order, basically, nothing happens. Let's try and log in with the Google. So I'm gonna select my account, and here I guess this is the trick. Okay, so follow me on this. So when I click I confirm the order, nothing really happens because my fucking logic just breaks down. Here is my cell phone, it's provided, it's like my account phone, and it also wants me to add a phone number, which is basically the same. Okay, so I will provide the same phone number here and click add a number, and it throws me an error. The tricky thing is that I'm already authorized to this service and I got my phone number here, but I cannot place an order because it wants me to add a phone number, but I cannot add the phone number because a user already exists with such a phone number, which is me. What the fucking loop is this? By the way, I'm now gonna take a moment to address the guys from this service. If you see this shit, please fix it so that it's understandable from the human perspective. I understand that I'm not a human, so I found this shit. I attract abnormal behavior. But a regular customer would just have his or her, mind blown by this. So please fix it, please. So let's report this bug in Jira. So what you're gonna do is click create. Let's go full screen here. The first thing is you select a project. It's populated here automatically, so it's okay. The next thing you gotta select is the task type. So given that it's a bug, we select a bug. Here you can select the status, but to do is good for now. So let's write the summary. How would we describe this abnormal shit right here in one sentence? An authorized user can place an order due to phone number error. Let's say even an authorized user with an added phone number can place an order due to a phone number error. So if this was a real thing in the real world, which it obviously is, but let's imagine that we are on this project. So how would I really report this bug? I would start with the environment section, and environment here is production, publicly accessible by the end user. So the next thing here is OS and browser. So I'm using the Mac OS, obviously. Let's check the version here. This is the 14.0. I can just, copy paste this shit here. And the browser is Chrome, and let's also check the version. You can use the major version within your reports, which is basically the 3 first digits. So 119. The next section is the preconditions. User is basically logged in via Google. User is logged in via Google. User is on the placing an order page. The next section is gonna be steps to reproduce. And the first step. This is gonna be an easy one because, the first step is just click the I confirm the order button. Confirm the order button. So this is just a single step right here. And the next thing we got is expected results. So what do we think should happen? Like, what does common sense tell us in this case? What the hell should happen when I click the confirm the order button? I think that the order should be placed. New order is placed successfully. How the hell else can it be? And the last section here is actual results. Order is not placed. User is presented. User is presented with add a phone number. Let's check how it actually looks here. Yeah, this is the add phone form, as the source code of the page says. Form. When is logged in via Google, yeah, also it has to add it to profile. This is another precondition. When user tries tries to add a phone. User is shown an error which says the number is already confirmed in another account. But obviously this is not another account, this is the same effing user. I would add the screenshot to our ticket. And I would also add some small details like this is step number 1 and this is step number 2. Cool, so let's save it, switch back to our task and attach this media to our ticket. And also add some hint that see attachment. Cool, now let's format this stuff a little bit so that it's more readable. So that basically wraps this shit up. I would assign this to some developers on the project. You can see it in the backlog of our project. It's not yet on the board because we have to create a sprint. So we got these sprints and usually this stuff is being moved or dragged, to the sprint from the backlog. So yeah, the task is being dragged here and we have to click start sprint, set the sprint duration. Usually it's 2 weeks, but it doesn't matter now. And then these tickets will appear on the board. The status can be changed here, some quick actions, but that's not the case now. We forgot to set the priority, I think, and severity for this stuff. So let's add it now. So let's go back to our ticket. Here we see the priority. I think this is the highest one. This may be even a blocker because I actually cannot place an order in this way. And as a user, I would just turn around, say fuck off, and I'm gonna search another platform to use, which is more understandable and more obvious for me as a regular client. So here is how it's usually done. Cool, so in this quick video I am showing you the abnormal behavior within the Instagram. As you can see, I've tried to tap on the write a caption section or the text area, so to speak, and it opens the keyboard only from the second time. When it's doing it the first time, the keyboard appears like for just a split second. Let's try that again. See? It appears only for a split second after I tap on write a caption text area, and then it just disappears. Not a critical bug, but still an unwanted behavior of the mobile application of Instagram in this case. Yep, here it goes once again. Let's add another defect here. Click on create. It's already selected as a bug. So what summary should we put in here? New reel preview. Tapping on write a caption text area doesn't open the keyboard. So the priority here is, from my point of view, it's low because user can do it from the second time. Okay, so the environment here is obviously production. The OS and browser in this case is gonna be just Instagram mobile app. And precondition is that user has selected a reel to add and is on reel description screen. If we're speaking about mobile apps, it's always a screen. And if we are talking about the web apps, then it's always a page. Just try to remember, like web equals page, mobile equals screen. And which steps do we have? The funny thing is that here it's also going to consist of one step only. It's going to go like tap on the write a caption text area, holder, keyboard area appears, keyboard area appears for a split second, sorry, and then disappears. It works fine from the second attempt. See attachment. And actually, let's label this as mobile. Let's select and put it to the active sprint. And let's add this media. Yep, so we have added this stuff. I would also add the device here. So yeah, I'm using an old iPhone 8 Plus because I am not so modern. I'm fucking out of touch. Who gives a fuck? Okay, and the iOS, I guess 16 or something like that. All right, I think everything seems cool. Yeah, so let's add this shit. Nice. So I've just demonstrated how you can create and report defects and how are they looking up on your Scrum board. Same in real life projects. There's absolutely no difference. But the better your description is, the more detailed it is, the better it is for other parties, such as developers, managers, businessmen, other stakeholders. The better it is for them to reproduce this and to fix it. If it needs fixing.
Back to the pyramid. These 3 layers are more than enough. And you cannot control everything because you'll just fry your brains. Believe me, I've tried that. And I went batshit crazy because of it. Non-technical people and managers usually do not understand the complexity and how hard it may be to maintain an automation framework with 1,000 tests, when the smallest changes in the system logic can cause a cascade of errors within an automation test suite. It's not always easy and it's not always fast. Contrary to what many people think about the IT sphere, it's so ever-changing and dynamic. Yes, it is ever-changing and dynamic, but not all of it. It's like a childish fucking play where you think that everything evolves so fucking dramatically and fast. No, it's not. There's plenty of domains. There's plenty of things related to the IT sphere which are not ever-change evolving. I don't know how even to pronounce this shit. Believe me, there is definitely no magic in it. It's just fucking zeros and ones and nothing else. It's machine logic. And yeah, speaking of fast, to back me up with a real-life example, I once had a project in the no-code domain where you could generate an Android APK file, I mean the application file for the Android devices, from the web application. And this process, this single case, it's a crucial case, by the way. And this single case scenario could take like from 20 minutes to about an hour. So try to automate that. Funny enough, but a machine doesn't give a damn about your KPIs, about your team buildings, about your cozy offices, cookies, and free coffee and tea. Machine doesn't give a damn about all that. Machine doesn't care about your human shit. It's plain simple. By the way, speaking from experience, no matter how good the automation or manual coverage is on lower environments, I mean the dev environment, staging, pre-prod, pre-QA, all that stuff, and no matter how thoroughly you try to emulate real user environment or behavior, when it's in production, when it's released to the production end for our end users, believe me, things will find a way to break, and users will break them, and users will encounter them, and they will report this shit. But it's not your fault. It is not always your fault. I mean, if you're letting obviously critical bugs into the production, this may be considered as a fuck up. But no fuck up is so crucial so that you gotta get your ass kicked out or something like that, or for a potential conflict. Believe me, it's a different mindset. It's a different psychology here. If we missed some critical mistake and it went to the production, we can always revert this. We can always fix this. And we learn from these mistakes. I have already mentioned this in the previous video, that I have learned from every single fucking mistake. It's all about precision in this job. Maybe it's all about even the self-discipline, especially if you're working remotely. It's all about these characteristics of a human, so to speak, of a human character. So this is just my personal vision of the process. But things will always find a way to break in the most unexpected ways as well. So do not panic when this happens and learn from your mistakes. By the way, that's why retrospectives are important in the agile Scrum process. But that's a whole other story. So basically, this job is not about shaming and blaming. It's just a job like any other job. So the UI layer is the easiest one here, because we can perceive it with our eyes, obviously. It's the layer which only has one goal. All these fancy animations, responsive design, interfaces, user experiences, it's all just one big fucking scam for your eyes. Visual deception in order to sell you some shit in a fucking fancy box. But that's a rude way of looking at it, actually. Because from the testing perspective, the UI is pretty fun. So let's go practical and create a UI checklist with the help of ChatGPT, of course. Because I'm the god of laziness. Yours truly.
And we're gonna create a task for clarifying the requirements, let's say for this template prototype for a messenger, which I found on the internet, in Figma. This is an app for designers mostly. Yeah, and we're also gonna use the ChatGPT, the latest version, which is GPT-4, which can analyze images, and hopefully it's gonna help us to create the checklist specifically for this functionality, which is, you know, the chat, messenger functions and shit. So first off, let's take a screenshot of this stuff and add it somewhere Cool, so let's attach it to the GPT. This is actually my first time. I haven't tried this model yet, you know, the latest one, which is like premium subscription, so I'm just gonna try it now. I have no clue what's gonna happen, how's it gonna respawn and shit, so yeah. So here I've got an image of messenger functionality. Provide me with the checklist of what I should test in order to achieve the best test coverage. Yeah, that's a lot actually, you know? That's a whole fucking lot of shit here. But we're not gonna need everything here. Okay, I guess I must specify my query. Provide me with the checklist for the UI test cases for the given image. I'm gonna be using the web version. Yeah, let's specify this a little bit. Web version and the latest Chrome browser on macOS 14. Now, I don't need performance here, I don't really need the accessibility part. Yeah, it gives me even more than I actually needed, so we'll just go through it a little bit and, you know, just select what we actually need for this part. So yeah, the layout and design. Chat window layout aligns with the design specification. I think that this is like purely some visual stuff, which is quite obvious to me, but still has to be mentioned. This is how it would look in the ideal world if we were, you know, if we had the capacity, the time and human resources to test all that shit, but we don't usually have that time. So we have to select the essentials from it. So, the layout and design part. Alignments of the elements. So this is basically regarding the elements that we see on this screen, which is this button, which is the text area for your message, which the additional functionality, the emojis, add some GIFs, and add some attachments or screenshot. And of course some additional functions here. And not to forget all the icons, the header of the screen, and this functionality right here. Resize, close, and start a video call, I think, and the additional menu. This is actually called the kebab menu, if I'm not mistaken. So these three dots, on the web slang they're called the kebab menu. So how would I go about this task? Messenger UI checklist. The visual part and design requirements, if any. Buttons, icons, interactable elements. The next thing is actually the functional part. Check the functional part. Button actions, send message, add emoji, attach files. By the way, the attach files part is a tricky one because you gotta clarify which file extensions you can actually attach and what is the minimum and maximum file size. So keep that in mind. This is important stuff in this case. Which file types and maximum size. Check message delivery. Check message allowed symbols, different languages, because you know in Chinese or in the Mandarin and Japanese they got their own graphics, so to speak, symbols. There's the Cyrillic, obviously, Ukrainian, for example, and then there's English, of course. And if we're speaking of other languages like Spanish or German, for example, or Dutch, they got some specific letters and characters that you can only meet within those languages, so keep that in mind. It also depends on like which set of languages do we need, which areas is this product gonna be launching on, so which these two. Yep, so this is a question, I guess, to the business. Once again, I'm showing you as a QA how you can participate within this process from the very beginning. As a real QA, in my opinion, should do this. Change avatar, I think. Change, even upload avatar. Image types, like IMG, PNG, JPEG, and so on. So this is a question once again. Minimum and maximum size of an image file. This is also a question. And yeah, what's next? Start video call. Check video call. Need 2 people or 2 devices. We're gonna be checking in this case from the calling and the receiving sides. So let's send a GIF. I think, yeah, emoji and GIF. Let's add it here. But I think it goes to the button actions. Yeah, so, send different types of information to the chat, so to speak. Send GIF to the chat. What else can we do? Send links or formatted text. I think you get the point. So just to end it, let me go through this. Yeah, also I would check the window resize if it is resizable. It should be, because if it's a web app like a browser chat, this could be responsive, and it should be responsive. What I mean by that, it should respond to the viewport. The viewport is the browser active window area. So this is the viewport, basically, like below the bookmarks. So let's add this here, responsive design. We can specify even more. We can be even more precise here, because, like, from technical point of view, the design responds to the viewport size, and the viewport size is basically a two-dimensional scale, so to speak, which consists of x and y axis, the size of which is measured in pixels. So this is so-called screen resolution. Resolutions. So this is also a question. As you can see, there's a lot of questions to the business side from even, from this small task. You can see how many questions we already have for the business. It's not a rare thing when you do not have any specifics rather than the mockup itself. Especially this goes for the startups. Usually when you're working in a startup, this is all you receive, like most of the times. And you gotta dig and ask a lot if you want to get a lot of, answers and make your testing count. Scrolling, I think this is also good. Maybe and element animations. Scrolling through chat history, element animations, if there are any. Let's add a couple more things here. How many symbols are allowed in a single message? So this is gonna be a test case when we figure that out. Like, for example, a message has to be no longer than, let's say, 1,000 symbols. Yep, so this goes. This is a question as well. Cool, let's create this shit. And we may add the test cases from this window. So this is pretty convenient stuff. Let's add it to the current sprint, and let's move it, I don't know, like in QA, for example, because we are already creating this checklist. So I think you get the point of how this process goes. Once again, nothing supernatural, nothing fancy, just doing our everyday job as a QA.
Alright, so the next and the more deep app layer is the API, which we have already touched in the previous video. So I'm not just gonna mumble a whole lot, and rather give you a glimpse of how we can construct a checklist for testing a single REST API method.
So here we got the API endpoint. This is the booking service, and this specific endpoint retrieves the information about the bookings that are already in the system. So I needed to create the checklist for future test case automation for this specific endpoint. And I've used the ChatGPT for it. So basically I have uploaded the screenshot to the ChatGPT, and I have asked AI to provide me with a list of test cases for the API method described on that screenshot. And I got lots and lots of test cases, but we're not gonna use all of them, because when you are on the real project, most likely that you're gonna have lots and lots and lots of such endpoints. So for example, if we take the Swagger, as you can see, there's a lot of endpoints. Each URL is basically an endpoint with its own documentation, with its own description of parameters, and so on and so forth. So most likely we're not gonna have the time to cover all of it. And as I've said many times before, we have to cover only the most important stuff. In case if it breaks, it's gonna really break the system, or the system is just gonna stagnate and we're gonna lose money off of that. We're not gonna let that happen. So this is the list of different test cases, and I've decided to take positives, which retrieves all booking IDs without any of the filters, just like this raw data, just the ID, the array of IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then there are of course different options to filter this data. We can make it return only the booking IDs, but then we can also make it return the first name, last name, check-in and check-out dates of any and every of these bookings, or just some specific bookings. It's a pretty simple endpoint. So these are the positive test cases. There's like 6 of those, and we either return the IDs or we return different parameters with these IDs. And we of course use a combo to return return the booking by a combination of parameters. For example, by first name and the check-in date, or by last name and checkout date, or by first name and last name and check-in date, or by even 4 of those. Pick anything you want. And then we go through some negative test cases. We are trying to retrieve the booking ID with some invalid first name which doesn't exist in the system, or the last name which doesn't exist, or with the dates of check-in and check-out which have the invalid format. If we refer to the documentation once again, we can see that here is the date format. So these are the years, months and days. If we take, for example, and reverse it, days, months and years, is gonna most likely it's gonna throw us an error, and we're gonna validate that it returns an error. In this case, in the case of negative case, so to speak, we are expecting the system to give us some error or an alert message, and we are typically asserting this message with some, expected result, because it's also this part of the system is also programmed. I think you get the point with the main difference between the positives and negatives here. And of course, we're gonna check some boundary test cases. So basically, these are tied to the check-in and check-out dates. We may use, the check-in date, which is equal to the current date. For example, today, the 11th of November, or the checkout date, which is also equal to the current date. Or we may try to use the check-in or check-out dates that are in the past. Or if we look at the system like from the common sense perspective, or logically, imagine that you are renting a hotel somewhere, so you just book a hotel room. The check-in date should and must be earlier than the checkout date. But there are cases when these dates are the same, and there's also a couple of tricky cases when the check-in date is in the past but the checkout date is in the future, or when the checkout date is earlier than the check-in date, or when the both dates, the check-in and checkout dates, are in the past. I think you get the point how your mind should work in terms of trying to validate different system scenarios. And basically, I think we're gonna be done with this endpoint at this time. So what I've done next, I've taken the most valuable parts from here, and I have created the booking API task for the checklist. Basically, I've taken them here. So this is how it looks in Jira if you would have received this ticket. As a QA, I mean, to provide the test case design, or just the checklist or whatsoever. This concludes the API check. Oh yeah, one more thing that I want to say here is that you may refer to the same documentation, but via a different service. I don't really know what service you're gonna be using on your projects, but I'm just doing a little showcase of what can possibly be. And in Swagger, it's even more comfy from my perspective, because for example, you've got some imaginary pet store and you got the pet IDs here, and this post request allows you to upload the avatar, so to speak, or the image of your pet or just a pet. So the documentation is interactive in this case, and you may try it all out, like provide some pet ID, for example, as a number, additional metadata such as description, probably, I think, and it tells you which data type each parameter has. So this is a number, this is a string, which like a text, and file, of course, it's a file, you can upload stuff here. So yeah, and then you just execute this stuff. And you can see how it would look if you would to upload this via the terminal, for example. You might do it via the terminal, but it doesn't matter at this point. I think you get the point of what I'm trying to tell you.
And then, of course, there's the database layer, which is basically the deepest one. It's hard to find something worth of demonstration specifically for this layer, but I will give you a glimpse anyway.
As far as database goes, so basically database is just raw data storage in the forms of tables, and we have already went through it in case of how it should look. And what should you do? I might try to use this online editor once again. So your UI collects data, API transfers this data to the database, and the database stores this data. From the human point of view, if the API works, it 99% means that the data has been successfully written to the database. But if we are automating this stuff, it's not always that obvious, because from the programmatic or from the point of view of the machine, a machine doesn't know until you tell it to know something by asserting it via specific criteria. A machine doesn't know shit unless you're programmed to. So knowing something is a criteria of the knowledge, so to speak, of the information, or of the correct information. And sometimes in our automation tests we have to dig even deeper than the API just to know that the data has been transferred, successfully written to our DB, and that it has the exact data type, for example, a string or a number. So I think you get the point. Here I provided the database table and asked it to create a query which is gonna add a new user to the customers table. So what I mean by that, here is this query with a description, and we're gonna run it to add a new user to the database table. Yep, so it executed successfully, and as you can see, the new user has been added to the table. What would you do as an automation QA? In your tests, you would refer to the specific database, specific table. You would get the specific data from it, and then you would assert this data with some expected test data, which is basically specific username which you're generating, or email, or in this case country, age. It all depends on which parameters and what the test really is. I think you get the point about the DBs. So we do not always touch that from the manual perspective, but I think sometimes, and it always depends upon the scenario, you just gotta dig deeper than the API and just into the raw DBs and operate with this syntax, so to speak. So yeah, this is as far as database layer goes.
So, as you have probably guessed by now, there is basically two types of requirements: visual and technical. Yeah, I know you can argue with that and say things like, "You're wrong, Alex, you're talking shit. There is usability, there is user experience, performance, accessibility, reliability, and so on." But in the end, from the QA's perspective, and don't forget that we are in our client's skin, so to speak, we see and feel our service or a product as the end user would. All of these subtypes can either be defined as visual, the things you see, or technical, things that operate what you see. Oh yeah, another important thing to mention here, and my experience taught me well, is that requirements are never final. They are always discussable, tweakable, basically at any stage of the SDLC process. I've had experience when PM would come and change the requirements like in the middle of the release or even after the release. I've also had experience of retesting the same feature 7 fucking times. I was feeling devastated, demoralized. Like, why do I have to do the same fucking shit all over again? It's because the logic and the behavior of this feature and the overall goal of this feature was ever changing. And before we have found a way to finally implement this shit, we had to retest it 7 fucking times. Isn't that a fucking madness, doing the same shit all over again and expecting things to change, as Voss said. But you know, it's demoralizing, as I've said, from the QA's perspective, and I consider this to be a bad practice in general. And that's why it's much better to create checklists rather than full-blown test cases. Because if you're working in such dynamic environments, then be ready that nobody would even fucking care about your work. Nobody will fucking care about anything you do, as long as the product is working fine. So how you document and all that stuff is just plain simple your own prerogative, so to speak. This is not to scare you, but keep that in mind and never take it personally. As I did, of course. Neurotic is my second name. So folks, this video concludes the manual part of this video series, from my personal perspective. It's scary to think that almost 10 years of experience can be wrapped up within this short video series, actually. This job consists of routine for the most part. Sometimes I look at it as meditation, and that's one way of seeing things. Not to rush and create from your inner peace of mind, body and your soul. Of course, interesting parts arise from time to time, but it always comes down to the business value and personal relations. I hope your journey is gonna be more exciting and captivating. See you in the next video. Peace!
Access denied.